How did Mercedes exploit Article C5? 4. 3. To run compression ratios approaching 18,001 at operating temperature while staying compliant with the 16.0 cold limit? That specific engineering interpretation explains their real advantage this season better than any other factor on the grid. The answer involves a thermal expansion loophole that triggered secret FIA inspections and a unanimous mid-season rule change. Andrea Kimi Antonelli now leads Lewis Hamilton by 50 points heading into the summer break because of this disputed machinery. Yet the paddock remains fundamentally divided on whether this was brilliant innovation or a regulatory failure forced by rivals. The FIA privately told Mercedes their engine was legal under the rules as they stood during testing. Despite that private clearance, no points or results were stripped from the championship table after the fact. The governing body still felt compelled to rewrite the measurement protocol entirely rather than defend their original ruling. Everyone is left wondering if the true gain was the 10 to 13 horsepower estimated by competitors. Some reports suggest the advantage could be even larger under specific high-load conditions. This tension between private legality and public correction creates a paradox for the current championship leaders. Mercedes holds a commanding lead built on machinery deemed both compliant and problematic enough to require immediate intervention. 5 competing manufacturers refused to accept the status quo and forced a collective regulatory response. You have to ask whether a team has a legitimate advantage when the definition changed mid-competition. The beneficiary of this disputed edge is now positioned to become the youngest world champion in history. Antonelli has 6 wins from the first 12 rounds of the 2026 campaign. The stakes extend beyond a single technical directive because competitor pressure overrode an initial compliance finding. No formal penalty was applied to the results already achieved on track this year. So, where does that leave us right now with a championship reflecting both excellence and ambiguity? The data tells one story while the political maneuvering tells another completely different narrative. Reconciling those two requires understanding how room temperature measurements diverged from hot dynamic reality. Numbers do not lie, rules got bent, rivals got angry. This discrepancy is the central axis around which every competitive result has rotated since preseason testing began. The technical foundation of this entire controversy rests on a single line in the 2026 regulations. Article C5, 3 explicitly capped geometric compression at 16.00 for any cylinder. Crucially, that limit was originally defined and measured only at ambient temperature. Engineers at Brackley recognized an immediate opportunity within that specific wording. They reportedly selected internal engine materials engineered to expand significantly once thermal loads increased. At room temperature during scrutineering, the pistons and cylinders remained perfectly within the legal geometric boundary. But as the power unit reached operating temperature, those components expanded just enough to alter the chamber volume dynamically. Estimates from rival manufacturers placed that hot running ratio as high as approaching 18:1. That is a massive deviation from the stated regulatory ceiling. Metal expands when hot, regulation stayed cold, physics won out. This material science approach turned a static measurement into a dynamic performance variable that existed only under race conditions. The estimated gain from this thermal manipulation sits between 10 and 13 horsepower according to Motorsport.com reporting. Other analysis suggests the benefit could be even larger depending on fuel load and ambient track temperatures. Why does this matter so much for the 2026 power unit formula specifically? The new regulations introduced a significantly larger electrical component than previous generations. Every manufacturer started with a clean sheet design and less historical precedent for enforcement. That fresh regulatory landscape created interpretation gaps that did not exist in prior eras. Honda's Shintaro Orihara noted separately that their own performance was definitely poor compared to other manufacturers when running began in Barcelona. While his comment addressed a separate deficit, it highlights how sensitive this new formula is to development direction. One team found extra compression through thermal expansion, while others struggled with baseline output. The FIA eventually acknowledged this sensitivity in their official statement via ESPN. They confirmed that a significant effort has been invested in finding a solution to the topic of the compression ratio. That diplomatic language masks what was essentially a fundamental disagreement about how to measure compliance. Was legality determined by the part sitting on a workbench, or by the part burning fuel at 12,000 RPM? Mercedes argued the former based on the letter of Article C5. 3. Rivals insisted the latter based on the spirit of competitive parity. Neither side was entirely wrong under the original framework. The regulation simply had not anticipated materials that could legally pass inspection yet functionally exceed limits during competition. This gap between static compliance and dynamic performance became the defining technical story of the season. It also set the stage for the political confrontation that followed once telemetry data began revealing anomalous performance characteristics. Teams do not usually challenge a competitor's engine architecture without concrete evidence suggesting a breach of intent. The fact that multiple manufacturers coordinated their complaints indicates they believed the thermal expansion was deliberate rather than accidental. Engineering choices are never neutral in Formula One. Every material selection carries strategic implications that extend far beyond the workshop. In this case, those implications reshaped the entire competitive hierarchy before a single wheel turned in anger. Picture this for a second. You are a team principal watching a rival pull away on the straights, convinced their engine is illegal, only to be told privately by the regulators that the very component you protested is actually compliant. That is precisely the frustration Honda, Ferrari, and Audi experienced when they formally challenged Mercedes over the compression ratio allegations. The governing body responded to that coordinated pressure by conducting undisclosed compression checks at operating temperature. These were not public tests announced in advance or shared with the grid. They were secret inspections designed to verify compliance under real thermal conditions without alerting the broader paddock. The outcome of those hidden evaluations was a private communication to Mercedes confirming the engine met regulations as written at the time of testing. No violation was found despite the rival's insistence that something was fundamentally wrong. Toto Wolff did not respond to that vindication with diplomatic silence. An ESPN headline attributed a far more blunt message to him, quoting the team principal as telling rival teams to get their S together. While that exact phrasing has not been independently re-verified through a direct source fetch in current research, the headline itself captures the intensity of the dispute. Words carry weight, tensions ran high, trust eroded quickly. Whether or not those specific words were spoken verbatim, the sentiment reflects a genuine breakdown in sporting cooperation during the 2026 campaign. Competitors had united against a single manufacturer and lost the technical argument at the first hurdle. The FIA's pride at clearance meant Mercedes could continue racing without modification or penalty, while the political fallout continued behind closed doors. This created an impossible position for the regulator. They had validated the design privately, but faced ongoing public skepticism from 3 major manufacturers who refused to accept the finding. The gap between private legality and public perception became unsustainable as the season progressed. Rivals were not merely complaining about performance deficits. They were questioning the integrity of the measurement system itself. If a component passes inspection cold but functions differently hot, does the inspection method need updating regardless of individual compliance? That question shifted the debate from whether Mercedes cheated to whether the rules were fit for purpose. The distinction matters enormously because it reframes the entire controversy. One narrative suggests deliberate rule-breaking that went unpunished. The other suggests clever exploitation of ambiguous wording that exposed a regulatory blind spot. Both interpretations have merit depending on which facts you prioritize. What remains undeniable is that the secret tests failed to produce the smoking gun that Honda, Ferrari, and Audi believed existed. Their coordinated protest collapsed under the weight of the FIA's own technical assessment. Yet the absence of a violation did not restore confidence in the process. If anything, it deepened the crisis by suggesting the rules themselves were inadequate rather than the enforcement. So where does that leave us right now regarding the legitimacy of the championship standings? The answer requires understanding how the FIA chose to resolve a problem they had already declared non-existent. Remember how this all started, with the question of how Mercedes exploited Article C5, zero cold limit. That exact technical tension is what forced the FIA into an unprecedented mid-season regulatory rewrite rather than issuing retroactive penalties. The governing body chose a compromise path that satisfied neither side completely but preserved the integrity of the championship table. All 5 power unit manufacturers approved the change via e-vote in a process the FIA described as unanimous. This was not a unilateral decree imposed from above against team wishes. It was a collective agreement that the measurement protocol itself required immediate correction regardless of past compliance findings. The new regime mandates compression ratio verification in both cold and hot conditions starting June 1, 2026. From 2027 onward, measurement will shift exclusively to the 130°C operating condition, permanently closing the ambient temperature loophole. A significant effort has been invested in finding a solution to the topic of the compression ratio, according to the official FIA statement released via ESPN. That language signals institutional acknowledgement that the original framework was insufficient for modern material science. Rules got fixed, points stayed intact, history remained unaltered. No results were stripped from Mercedes despite the regulatory admission that the measurement method needed urgent revision. This forward-looking resolution deliberately avoided relitigating whether the original design was legal under the old standard. The FIA had already privately cleared the engine, making retroactive punishment legally untenable even if politically desirable for rivals. Instead, they changed the definition of compliance going forward to prevent future exploitation of thermal expansion characteristics. The compromise effectively declared that past performance was legitimate under outdated rules while ensuring future performance would be judged by updated standards. This distinction between historical validity and future enforcement is critical to understanding why the championship standings remain unchanged. Competitors accepted the compromise because continuing to race under ambiguous measurement protocols threatened the entire season's credibility. Unanimous approval suggests even Mercedes recognized that defending the old standard indefinitely was unsustainable despite their pride of clearance. The political cost of ongoing disputes outweighed the technical benefit of maintaining the status quo. So where does that leave us right now regarding competitive balance for the remainder of 2026? The answer lies in how quickly each manufacturer can adapt their designs to meet the new dual condition verification requirement. Some teams may have already optimized for hot running performance and face minimal disruption. Others might need significant rework to pass both cold and hot inspections simultaneously. The June 1 implementation date created a hard deadline that compressed development timelines dramatically. Engineering resources had to be redirected from pure performance gains to regulatory compliance verification. That resource allocation shift could reshape the competitive order independent of the original compression controversy. The unanimous vote ensured no team could claim unfair disadvantage from the rule change itself. Everyone faces the same new constraints from the same starting date. Whether those constraints favor or hinder specific manufacturers depends entirely on their existing design philosophies and development flexibility.